I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm not a huge fan of puzzle games. It's not that they're bad, I just suck at them. I'll be the first to admit that I am absolutely horrible at Tetris. And yet, I couldn't stop playing this week's review, And Yet It Moves. And Yet It Moves is an interesting little game where you control a humanoid piece of paper across about 20 stages or so. It's essentially a cross between a platforming game and a puzzle game, as your character can only jump in addition to moving. The real selling point of the game, though, is the ability to rotate the screen at 90-degree angles. It's with this mechanic that the game primarily focuses on. It's really simple to learn. Left and right rotate the level 90 degrees in the direction that you press. If you push the up arrow key, the map will rotate 180 degrees. It seems simple, but there are some catches to this. Your little character's momentum continues when rotating the screen, and he really can't fall too far. In fact, there are times when you might witness some cheap deaths just because you fall a distance and don't realize it's too far. In fact, falling is the primary death you'll probably see. The only way to save yourself from great falls is to land on a sharply inclined platform, because somehow that cushions the fall. However, it's not always easy to see exactly how inclined these platforms need to be. And it's not recommended to rely on this because the survivability is a bit sketchy. In addition to falling, there are plenty of other hazards. You may have seen the black voids that are located throughout the stages. These holes act as an instant death area and should be avoided at all costs. Your character can also be crushed by rocks and lit on fire, but those probably won't happen too often. So how about the puzzles? Well, each stage typically has one or more in some form. It may be a simple rotate around the void pits, or it could be something like lure bats near a creature that's blocking your way. Some of the puzzles are interesting and others are just insanely challenging. One of the more frustrating ones are the ones where you have to light a tree on fire to proceed. In order to do that, you have to get charcoal to strike the stone ground, and then lure it over to the obstacle to burn it away so you can continue on. The problem is that it's not exactly easy to figure out the mechanics of the fire. Eventually, I think I just got lucky. In addition, there's springboards that you can find in the jungle levels. You'd think that it would be logical to use them, but actually figuring out the physics of them can be nearly impossible. Sure, you should just need to get air and then jump on it to get even more hang time, but it doesn't always work that way. Another puzzle element are the rope swings, which are actually fun to use once you learn how rotating the stage affects them. It may sound like the game is unnecessarily frustrating, but it's really not. There are plenty of checkpoints, and the stages aren't too terribly long. In addition, you have infinite lives, so you won't have to worry too much about experimenting too much and wasting lives. It's actually probably for the best that you do have an endless life supply, because later levels can be a bit more unforgiving with their puzzles. Here's another example. You get split up and have a clone copy that is on the other side of the screen. Move both of them at the exact same time, but as you can tell, each is mirrored from each other. The previous mirror puzzles weren't too bad, but since this one essentially has an out of bounds area, it can take a bit more brainpower to figure it out. The game only really has 3 separate worlds. You start off in a cavern, move on to a forest, and finally end up in another underground level. Thankfully, the game has a lot of hand-drawn art, making it very easy on your eyes. It's almost like the developers were purposely going for a simplistic look, since when you get down to it, it's a very simplistic game. Really, I only have one main complaint about the game. It's the music. I know the game has a very simple look, but the music is really lackluster. Most of the time, it's a very basic loop of several notes. It's not very interesting at all, and is purely forgettable. After completing the game, which really doesn't take too long, you do unlock some other game modes. Some of these range from speedruns to a mode where you only have a limited amount of rotations for each stage, to even a survival where you only have a few extra lives to work with. And you may be asking, just how long does it take to complete the game? And the answer to that is about 2 hours tops. After this, you can just get access to the more challenging game modes. That's really all I have. For what it is, And Yet It Moves is probably one of the few puzzle games I actually enjoyed. Sure, it can be frustrating, but really, what puzzler isn't? Besides, it's not the kind of frustrating that makes me want to break something, and it was short enough that it kept my interest. I'll be honest and say that the $10 price tag that's currently on Steam is a bit more than I'd be willing to suggest you pay, and instead maybe wait for one of the million Steam sales where it may drop to about $5 or so. Final score? 8 out of 10. This is Reaper. If you haven't done it yet, check me out on Facebook, facebook.com/ReapersReviews. Happy fragging.